Hi everyone, welcome back to the Power Hour podcast. I haven't recorded one of these in a while, but you wouldn't have noticed that because the ones that have been recorded have been scheduled. But I'm here with a super exciting guest, Nick Doelman, Microsoft MVP and Power Pages specialist. Nick, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm all right, man. It's been an exciting week for me and Power Academy in general. I just launched my course, which was interesting.
Awesome.
And I've been a few things going on as well, so I've just been trying to kind of manage all of that. But yeah, this episode is primarily about you. And as we spoke a little bit about before I started recording, I really want to shape the focus of this episode around your Power Pages knowledge and kind of Power Platform expertise. And you've also got some interesting career insights that I feel like our users would get a lot, not our users, our listeners would get a lot of benefit in hearing about. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And the first question I have for you, Nick, because Power Pages has always been a bit of a niche, the way I've seen it within the Power Platform stack. And as I'm sure you know, I had an episode recorded with Ulrich, who was great and spoke a lot about this. But I'm curious to get your thoughts as well. So, in terms of Power Pages as a general Power Platform consultant, how much emphasis should someone put on learning Power Pages?
That's a great question, and of course, my answer might be a little bit biased because I've of course been have been diving deep into this for the last, oh man, like 10, 11 years at least, in Power Pages especially. For me, it's a huge skill. I think at very least, anybody working the Power Platform should be at least familiar with the what it brings to the table, where you would use it, where you wouldn't use it, what it is, what it's not, at a very bare minimum. So at least you can answer those questions, intelligently to a client or a customer. In terms of getting into this, and I think this actually kind of rings true with almost everything in the Power Platform. I've always said, and people may have heard me say this before, it's very much like Harry Potter. The wand doesn't choose, or the wizard doesn't choose the wand chooses the wizard. And this is how I think a lot of us have kind of fell into the business application space. All of a sudden you're working, whether you're working for a customer or you're working through a partner, all of a sudden something lands on your lap and you have to figure it out. So whether that's Power BI, whether that's Dynamics 365, Canvas apps, model driven apps, Power Pages, very much something kind of lands in your lap because a customer needs it or you need it within your own company, and somehow you're the person who ends up learning it. And I think if you ask a lot of people in the community, that's how we ended up here accidentally. So going back years ago, I had to, I learned Dynamics CRM, and of course, I did a lot of that building XRM. So we were building Power Apps before they were called Power Apps, using low code methods atop of CRM. And around how I got into Power Pages specifically around 2014, very large project. Was basically me and another person. We were working for a large partner, had a large customer, and they actually had purchased ADX Studio licenses. ADX Studio at the time was an ISV, meaning it's an independent software vendor that built applications that would sit on top of, at that time, Dynamics CRM. And they had built basically external web facing system platform that basically talked to Dynamics CRM, of course, is sort of the what became Dataverse, in the end, as it all kind of evolved. And of course, over the years, ADX Studio was purchased by Microsoft, became Dynamics 365 portals, became Power Apps portals, and about 3 years ago became Power Pages. So when I talk about these different things, we're all basically talking about the same product at the end of the day. And so basically how it came to be is like me and another one of my other colleagues at the time, it was kind of one of us had to take care of a lot of the custom development aspects of the project, which I have a lot of background in, or one of us had to take on the portal aspect of the project. And we rock, papered, scissors as to who would take what. And I don't remember the result, and I don't remember if I won or lost, but somehow I ended up taking on the portals component. So I had to dive in and learn how it all worked, how to install it, because that time it was an on-prem system, how to install it, how to configure it, how to get it to talk to Dynamics 365, how to configure the model-driven forms and views, or at that time we called them CRM forms and views, to be able to be displayed on different web pages. And then when those didn't fit, how to customize. And at that time, we developed in ASPX pages. We could create custom pages that could talk through this framework. So it was kind of trial by fire, and thankfully the partner I worked for kind of gave me the time to actually ramp myself up and learn it. And from there, that's how I dove into it. We worked on a few other projects. I went off to be independent, working on regular Power Platform projects. Would always include a portal component, and spent 2 years at Microsoft, working Microsoft Learn, doing the documentation around Power Pages as well, which was really interesting because I got to work. Being an MVP, I already had a good relationship with the Power Pages team, but working within Microsoft, I got much more deeper connections and networking. Went back out to be independent again, working on Power Pages projects along with Power Platform projects and training and a bunch of other things I like to do. So that's a roundabout way of, if you want to learn Power Pages, definitely it's a huge, great skill. There's a huge demand out there for people and projects. So I would actually say nowadays, for a lot of the Power Platform projects, there is an opportunity at least to consider Power Pages or to have Power Pages as part of that project, and to get those externally facing customers and clients to access your business systems. This, of course, is now rapidly changing. I'm not sure if you heard of this thing called AI coming into our world.
I think I may have heard of it. Yeah.
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 So, of course, Power Pages, I feel, is going to be a great foundation for basically hosting a lot of those agents that your customers are going to need to interact with. So, Power Pages, as it stands today, yes, there's a lot of great things to learn, but how the infrastructure and how the technology is changing, it is going to be rapidly changing over the next few months. And I'm actually already trying to get my head ramped up with all the new announcements and things that Microsoft is doing. But understanding that in terms of a lot of the fundamentals of Power Pages and a Power Platform in general, we need to make sure we keep focusing on those fundamentals and using these new tools and incorporating them into our day to day, because customers are still going to be quite comfortable with our regular apps, but we can now, get into the more agentic world. We don't have to pick one or the other. I think we're going to kind of see a transition kind of from one to the other. How that's going to end up, I'm really not sure at this point. I'm not sure if anybody is. So this is a little bit of a bumpy ride for us. But yeah, again, end of the day, if you're in the Power Platform and you're kind of looking at things to learn, along with all the standard ones that we're talking about, Copilot Studio, of course, Power Automate, Power Apps, understanding Dataverse, but Power Pages definitely is a good tool to have in your toolbox and your projects. From a high level, just understanding what it does. But if you really want to dive into it, there's plenty of work, plenty of opportunity, and it's a lot of fun, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that there was a lot of gold in what you said, and a lot of that I took from that for sure. I mean, you see, I think Power Pages is especially unique because, from my experience, and I think it's a general rule of thumb in the Power Platform, if you're looking to expose your Dataverse data externally to people who need to see it, or if you want people to input their data externally to external users, Power Pages is currently the only space in the Power Platform stack that allows for that to happen from a web-based service. So I think there's a lot of value in that, and I've seen a lot of opportunities at companies to adopt it. Now, I have a funny story with Power Pages because I was a junior, and like a lot of people who stumbled onto the Power Apps and Power Automate and SharePoint scene, that's kind of where I started, right? I built like a simple Canvas app, I connected it with Power Automate Flow, and it all went into a nice SharePoint list. And I was very proud of my little application. But I found a role at a startup company as a junior, and the first thing they threw me into was Power Pages, and I was like, oh, this is like a whole new world, right? So I have mixed feelings with Power Pages, but I definitely understand the value, and I've been encouraging myself to learn it as well. So for me, and also the people listening to this episode, Nick, what would you say the roadmap looks like from zero to actually being somewhat coherent in developing Power Pages sites that work?
Well, that's it's a great question. And yeah, I could go in a bunch of different ways. Well, first off, you have to determine I did want to kind of drill down on one thing. You have to determine if Power Pages is the right solution. And you talked about how Power Pages is, yes, it connects directly to Dataverse. We have a security layer, we have authentication layer, but also know, like with the Power Platform, one of the great things about the Power Platform, there's always sometimes more than one way to achieve a business opportunity or to achieve a business requirement. So yes, Power Pages is great in terms of how it talks to Dataverse, how you can interact with that data, you can display data, you can set the whole security structure around it. However, there are other options as well. And at Dynamics Minds, I did a session with George Dubinsky and Matt Snecker, and we talked about different ways to actually interact with Dataverse. I was representing Power Pages, of course. Matt Snecker, who I think most people in the community know very well, he's built a whole platform using basically static websites, and the Color Cloud event website, for example, is generated through static sites, but it does talk to Dataverse through the Azure APIs. So that's a very interesting approach. Kind of changes some of the licensing and consumption game. Or you could build something from ground up using .NET. And George described how he used .NET Aspire from a customized kind of thing. So a lot of times as part of the solution architecture phase or the business requirement phase, you have to determine, is Power Pages the right fit? Now, a lot of times it definitely is, but sometimes there are other options to consider, including I've even done it very simply where if I had a Power Automate flow generating an HTML page that we threw up on an Azure static website. Simple as that. The data is not real time because I just queried the Dataverse data, created a static HTML page, threw it up. So there's the very, very simple to the very complex. And sometimes we want to make sure, is a requirement like, do we just have to, if we just want to show what inventory we have, we want to show that once a day, we could do that in Power Automate, really, to be honest, save a lot of licensing. So all of that kind of going back on track in terms of, I think the question was in terms of the skills and things and what to get into Power Pages.
Exactly.
I would recommend, yeah. First off, I think it's just good to have a fully good understanding of what Dataverse does and how it works. And that's going to be a foundation not only for Power Pages, but for model-driven apps, for Canvas apps, for Power Automate. Even now we're itching into the Dynamics F&O and Business Central worlds as well, as they're beginning to tie more and more to Dataverse. So I would say the number one skill to learn is Dataverse. And along with understanding Dataverse, more from a solution architecture point of view, is understand data modeling. Understand how the data fits together, how you're going to represent those real world objects, how they're going to relate to each other. More and more, we have tools to do this. We can go into Chat GPT and say, design me a data model to do this. Or we could even go into, of course, Copilot or some of these other tools. Miro boards as well can generate this into diagrams. And then also with Plan Designer. Plan Designer is part of helping you create that data model. Now, it's still early days a little bit, but iterating back and forth. So understanding, but I still think it's important. Yes, AI can help you, but also AI, we talk about Copilot is not pilot, it's Copilot. So you should have a good understanding how data modeling works. And you can work with the AI to develop that data model within Dataverse. Once you have those foundations, then the next stage for Power Pages. Now, if I was to answer this question even a month ago, I would say, okay, understand how the Dataverse, the model-driven app side works in terms of views and forms, how those things work, because those you can create those components in a model-driven app and reuse those as Power Pages components to give you a list of data, to give you a form of data for adding and entering data, which is still a lot of the great power of Power Pages going forward. You're building a security model on top of that. So understanding how those components works, it's also important. And then you also have the other controls. They have like a card control as well and a few others. Once you have those concepts down, then of course, understanding the security model. The security model very similar to how I would say the out-of-the-box Dataverse model works, but it is unique to Power Pages because it centers around the contact. The contact is your users logging in versus in Dataverse where you have your system users. So understanding that distinction and getting the understanding of the security, because security is so important on a Power Pages site. If you're building a model-driven app and you screw up on security, well, yeah, it is a big deal, but it's a big deal within your own company or within the client that's using it. If you screw up security on a Power Pages site and expose data, you're exposing it. You have the potential to expose it to the entire world. Now, thankfully, Microsoft does have some guardrails in place that you have to make some key decisions before you expose that data, but still the mouse clicks, you're just about 3 mouse clicks away from exposing all of your data out onto the internet. So you definitely want to get your head wrapped around that. And of course, authentication. Again, then it splinters. There's so many things. There's administration, but then you get into the pro dev side, and there you can start building customized web templates using Liquid and JavaScript. Of course, CSS is very important as well. This is where you said you talked to Ulrika. This is where she shines. She can make a site not look like a Power Pages site with CSS, and it always impresses me of how she can make that happen. And that's really a very inspiring thing and very important thing to learn as well. I can sort of do it. My sites are very functional. But also it's just so it's important to have that CSS. So these, as of, I would say, quote unquote, today, some of those are the key skills. And that sounds like a lot, but it is. You can reiterate on that. Going forward, I think looking at what Microsoft is doing now with what they talked about a week or two ago with single page applications, that being able to be hosted within a Power Pages site, kind of opens up the world into the React TypeScript type thing, which was always something that we could definitely do. But this now basically brings Power Pages to a lot of the rest of the world in terms of how they're developing websites. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Yes, you can create your site using stuff like React and TypeScript, but you also now have access into the Dataverse web APIs in order to interact with the data, build that structure, and then load that as a Power Pages site and utilize the security, the infrastructure, the authentication. This is something I'm currently diving into right now because I kind of see this is the way things are going. And it's not that we have to be full-on React developers or React experts, because the cool thing with the tooling, GitHub Copilot, Claude, or some of these other tools, through, and I know the term vibe coding is tossed around a lot these days, but these AI tools are able to generate the code and generate our vision very quickly. And again, you should have at least an understanding how this code works. What I'm finding I use GitHub Copilot daily now, and it's almost scary. I find it's almost reading my mind as I'm doing the code. It's actually showing me the code. I'm like, how did you know that's what I was looking for, kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? It's picking that up. But it's making me much more efficient. I'm able to generate some custom web pages within the context of Power Pages a lot faster and more rapidly than I could even a couple months ago because of these tools. So going forward with the single page applications, now we're going to be able to much more easier deliver on the vision of our clients. Because what I do find, yes, there's the out of the box components like the forms and the lists, they work very well. But a lot of times you're going to a client and they've had a designer that came in long before they decided to use Power Pages, did all of these Figma sketches and designs. And that's kind of what the customer is looking for. So you have to have that sometimes hard conversation. Like, do you want here's what Power Pages can give you in a low code maker experience. Here's your list, your forms. And for some customers, that's perfect. They don't need they need it functionally. It does look okay. But then there's other clients that go, no, we have branding and corporate standards. We need to stick to our Figma designs. Like, okay, we can still use Power Pages. It's still a good fit, but it's going to be a lot more customized to fit that. And so far, we've been doing a lot of stuff in web templates and Liquid, but now I see that shifting more to that React web API world. And of course, the tools are going to be a lot easier. And I also am pretty confident the community is going to be building these React controls in terms of our lists and our forms, putting those out, in GitHub or something, that we're going to be able to use these components in our own sites, but have the flexibility to kind of fit a lot of those Figma designs that our customers are going for. So it's definitely an exciting time with Power Pages. It's transitioning. And I didn't even begin to scratch the surface of how, it's going to be used to surface agents and things like that, because I don't even know what that's eventually going to end up landing and looking like as well. I think software in general, how we interact with it, it's not going to be full on chatbots. I think it's going to be a very much a fluid user interface as we interact with these agents. And that goes both for Power Apps as well as for Power Pages sites. So yeah, there I. So just so you're aware, Hudin, my answers, if you, they're never short, they'll go on.
No,
So
no, 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 but like I can't interrupt you because they're so well articulated and I'm getting so much value out of it. So I know our listeners are as well. And it's funny you bring up vibe coding and it's funny you bring up AI because that was one of my next questions. And it was, I was reading one of your blogs and it's titled Low Code is Dead, Long Live Vibe Coding. And I loved it.
yes,
I thought it was a great, I thought it was a great article. And I think you raised some very valid points and a lot of what you were just alluding to now in the sense of previously, we needed React developers. We need people to know the code and the framework inside out. But nowadays, we're kind of coming to a position where you need to understand the code. I do not recommend putting code into production you don't understand. You did not hear that from me. You need to understand the code. But I feel like it's making it much more accessible. Maybe things that you didn't know how to do, you're not having to dig through Stack Overflow to try and find out how to do it. You can ask GitHub Copilot or you can ask ChatGPT or whatever you're using to help you write your code. So my question about this is, firstly, could you introduce the concept of vibe coding for our listeners, to the people who don't know what that is? And then also, how do you see it kind of changing the work? I know you alluded to it a bit in what you were saying, but if we can delve a little bit deeper into that for Power Platform professionals and especially Power Pages developers.
yeah, for sure. And I think there's probably about 100 different definitions of what vibe coding means to different people. There's I think at its very core, and this, because this actually came from, I believe it was one of the folks that worked, I want to say was it OpenAI or somebody who kind of came up with the concept. And this is such a new concept. It was last February. He posted something on X about, hey, I've been working on a project and I've got to get into the vibe of this coding, meaning you're asking AI, here's what I want to build, and you're saying it in natural language, and it's generating your code for you. And then you just let the compiler go and run it. And you can go on YouTube and you can see dozens of examples. One example I looked at, one of the guys went on, he used one of the IDE environments. I wasn't sure if it's Visual Studio Code or something else, but basically started interacting with the AI and said, let's build a Tetris game. And said, let's build Tetris. Now, to be fair, out on the internet, there's the source code for Tetris is all over the place, sort of different variations. So it had a lot of good source material to work with. Now it came up, and of course it came up with a few errors, but his whole focus was, okay, this error came up, fix this error. And it would go through and fix that error. He wasn't looking at the code at all. And that was their concept of vibe coding. And eventually, after some iterations, about 10 minutes or so, actually had a somewhat working prototype of Tetris. For me, I still think it's important, to at least understand the code that's being generated. Also using those tools, of course, there's the question of security and performance, but you can even ask GitHub Copilot or the AI, is this code secure? Or what are things that we should be looking out for with this code in terms of security? What are some things? Can we make this code more efficient? It seems kind of slow. Or what can we do to make this more efficient or reduce the number of API calls and that type of thing? Copilot can help with that. What I'm finding is, because I do have a pretty good understanding, definitely on the Power Pages side, of building out these web templates and with JavaScript, it is coming. There are things where I'm like, okay, like, how do I make this stupid checkbox spaced over here right? Or how can I actually make this piece of code do what I want? Then the code will generate. And yes, I might not have, as you said, I might have to go in Stack Overflow or Google, or even look at code I wrote 4 years ago. Okay, how did I do this again? The GitHub Copilot comes up with this. And basically, from a learning aspect in the project I'm working on now, I probably have learned at least, I'm sure, like 50 new things or 50 new concepts, because I understood the code that got generated. I took a look and I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't think of doing it this way. Or, oh, okay, I didn't know that we could do that. Or I didn't even know that this particular CSS class even existed for this particular aspect of it. So from there, and then the nice thing is I can run it and see if it works. And then, to be quite honest, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes AI comes up with these weird concepts that there's no way in the world that would even work. And you kind of have to backtrack a little bit. It's injected code sometimes in places that I didn't really notice. I go back later like, okay, who did this? And like, oh yeah, the AI did this. So
right.
we have to fix that. So you still need a lot of those skills. But in terms of delivering something, so for instance, there's a couple web pages that I think would have taken me at least a day or two. It got me down to an hour or two um, to build these things. So not only that, I was able to deliver because everybody's to-do list is massive. So I was able to deliver a lot more work in basically the same amount of time than I would have to have done it earlier from scratch or checking other source code or looking at that or testing or iterating. And it's sort of coming up with ideas as well. So that to me is a lot of vibe coding. The other part of this, which I think is kind of exciting, yeah, I did say low code is dead, and I know a good buddy of mine, Nathan Rose, kind of called me out on that a little bit. Good friendly rivalry there because he's a big Power Effects guy and was sort of saying, yeah, Power Effects could be the one of the languages. But I'm finding with this whole concept of low code is yet another abstraction layer. And as if we actually, there's a meme out there of a bunch of astronauts kind of pointing at a gun at each other, all of all the different abstraction layers, all the way down to the binary code. And early in my career, I did learn how to do machine code and assembly language. I couldn't do it now. That was like, I'm not going to say how many years ago as it was, but we always had these sort of new levels of abstraction layers, low code being one of them. But now it's almost like we're taking a step back. We're kind of like, okay, do we need, and again, I'm not making a statement here. I'm just sort of asking the question, do we need that low code abstraction layer? Because now I have a tool that's going to be generating pro code for me. At the end of the day, low code, you're building Canvas apps, you're dragging those things, you're running Power Effects formulas. It is also generating pro code behind the scenes. I mean, we all know that it's generating binary code. What I find with vibe code, what it's also doing, it is, yes, we're now using natural language, but it is also generating code. The cool thing I like about vibe coding is we can see that code. We can actually go into and see it's readable JavaScript or readable TypeScript. I built an app the other day using a non-Microsoft tool I was just playing around called Replit. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it. And it generated a React-based site tied to a Postgres SQL server. Again, I'm not really strong on TypeScript or React for that matter, even PostScript, but I was able to generate this app. It was worked pretty well. It was back and forth iterating a little bit, but I was still able to go in and see that code and just basically, because code is following logic, see how that all worked. So as a professional, it's like two things. First off, it's kind of scary, kind of like, wow, this is taking my job in a sense. But it's also giving me as a solution architect, empowering me to deliver on solutions faster. And if we can deliver on solutions faster, then that means we can do more for our client in a shorter period of time, for a lot of things. And yeah, there are still things like I still spent hours trying to fix one little thing because even AI couldn't fix that for me. So I had to kind of drill down a little bit. But yeah, that's how I see vibe coding. And I definitely see that bringing the low code and the pro developers, those fusion teams even tighter together, because we're not just developing two things that talk to each other. So we're not necessarily building a low code app that's calling pro code. We're all generating the sort of the same code set, but we're coming from it from two different angles, which I think is going to be a pretty powerful story in the world of business applications going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see the marketing at Microsoft, we can't get away from it. That's all it is. It's all the AI stuff. It's all the Copilot. It's all the generative AI that they're pushing out. And it's an interesting point you raised because I share the similar experiences. Like, for example, we spoke very early on in this podcast about how I just released my course, right? And I had a sales page that I needed to make. And I couldn't take the time that I needed to kind of visualize the way that would look. So I use Lovable. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it generates replica web pages for you. It's really cool. And I wasn't going to use any of the code it generated, but I was able to give that to the Kajabi expert I was working with and say, hey, this is kind of how I want it to look. And she was able to take that and effectively just replicate the exact page in Kajabi. And a piece of work that probably would have taken weeks took days, and I was able to get the sales page out. So for businesses, for entrepreneurs, for personal use, I think it's so important, and it's saving us a lot of time and a lot of money, as you see. I mean, I feel like the Chat GPT, I think it's Pro. I don't think it's Premium. Premium is like the £200 a month one. No, the one
Yeah.
below that one, which is like 20, I think it's $25, £20 per month. I don't even see that as an expense anymore because I'm literally on it every single day. I'm literally asking it questions and getting it to help me with what I'm doing. And it's interesting to see the way that this is shaping the way we work. And something I do struggle with though is because I can see it impacting my life as a professional as well, but also in a personal level. But with the Power Platform encouraging this AI use and encouraging generative AI and Copilot so much, what I struggle to understand and see how the future would look for people trying to bridge that gap, people trying to bridge the gap between pro code and low code. It's my main question because I've been using ChatGPT and Copilot to help me write my JavaScript code for a long time, ever since it came out, and it's helped me a lot, and it's helped me learn a lot as well in a shorter amount of time. But I really wonder how much value someone in the Power Platform can gain from this generative AI in terms of generating pro code for themselves. And I was kind of wondering how you see it impacting Power Platform professionals from a technology perspective. So, for example, Power Apps, even Power Automate, generating some fetch XML and some areas that you might not understand. How can Power Platform professionals take these tools and make the best use out of them, in your opinion?
Oof. That's a great question, and I don't have a very clear answer. And I don't know if anybody does. And
Yeah.
I've used this analogy multiple times, and people are probably gonna get sick of me saying it. I don't know if you've ever read the book, or at least know the book, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People,
But yeah. Yeah.
from
Yeah. Yeah.
Stephen Covey.
For
So
sure.
one of the habits is begin with the end in mind. Um, and that's, I think, always it's a great habit to go if you're building. Like I had to, I had to build some steps for my house this past weekend because the other ones kind of fell apart on me. So I knew what my end in mind was and how to get there, kind of thing. And that's with any goal setting. In terms of technology, in terms of the Power Platform, when we talk about the end in mind, I think of two instances. I think of going from on-prem to the cloud. When they started talking about being able to move the on-prem systems into the cloud, we kind of knew how that was going to look. We knew what our end game was. We weren't going to have servers in a closet in our businesses anymore. We were going to connect to the internet, and we were going to actually connect. Our servers would be off in the cloud or in a data center, and we'd go through the internet. In terms of our user experience, it really was going to be the same. Whether that server was sitting in a closet next to me or whether it was in the cloud, CRM was going to look like CRM. To the point, people don't even know whether it was online or even on-prem, except for the fact that it said Dynamics 3 CRM online in the upper header, basically, right? So that was the end in mind. Pretty straightforward. We started talking about building low-code applications. Again, the end in mind. We're going to have an app for our end users. It's an app or a system. Whether it was developed by a pro coder or whether it's developed by a maker, at the end of the day, the user experience should be the same or close to the same. We knew what the end in mind was. We wanted to enable people to build the exact same type of applications that traditionally we would get a pro coder to build for us. And of course, with that, again, a lot more rapid, a lot more maintainable, all of those great things the Power Platform gives us. Now, Microsoft, you're right. They're pumping agents and copilots and all this. What is our end in mind? What does this mean? Does this mean I'm now going to be interacting through my regular ERP system through a chatbot, or is this going to be, like I described earlier, kind of more of an interactive interface? I like to think of the plan designer like this, right? You start kind of with a prompt, and then the interfaces come and present you with information, and you kind of slick yes or no. Is it stuff like Project Sophia, which is kind of another kind of emerging thing, or Microsoft's been working on and pushing as well? All of these different things, and I have a feeling that this time around we're not quite sure what our end game is or when we're going to get there. So as a Power Platforms professional, this is where it makes me a little bit uneasy, a little bit of what I like to call AI anxiety, because I'm like, okay, are we on the right path? Is this what I should be learning? Is this what we should be talking to our customers about? And this is where something else I learned, or I read a good quote is, don't focus on the new fads, focus on the fundamentals. So I think a lot of the fundamentals of business applications really haven't changed since we started using computers. We want to be able to interact to make a particular business application or business process a lot easier, or we want to store information a lot faster. At the end of the day, we want to use these as tools. And that's all it is. It's a tool. So now, how are we going to use AI to make those tools better? And I'm seeing a lot of, well, I have an app, and I have an app that I built years ago, Power Apps. It's a Canvas app. Actually, it's backend using Dataverse. It's a model-driven app where I keep track of all my projects and all the time tracking around my projects, and I export that data into QuickBooks and do my invoicing. So I have a Canvas app, runs on my phone, and I basically put in whatever project I'm working on or whatever thing I'm working on. I like to track my time just more for statistics, whether, okay, I spent an hour writing a blog post, or I spent 3 hours working on this client. And it's all tagged as being billable or not billable and all that kind of fun stuff. And I wouldn't say it's overly complex, but it works for me. And because it's my own software, I can make little adjustments over time. But I'm looking at this time tracking app. And of course, now I'm like, okay, should I build a Copilot agent for this? Something that's going to come to me, prompt me in my teams every day to say, okay, what did you work on today? Or would you like me to take a look at your Outlook calendar and begin to fill out your time tracking for the day? And like, I could definitely build that, but is it saving me a lot of time? Because this app works really well. And these are the types of questions I think are beginning to bubble up of, yes, can we use AI for this, or do we really need to? Or are we beginning to or solutions to a problem that doesn't really exist? And I think this is going to be part of the big challenge as we're working with clients is going to be the whole before a lot of times, is it an automation or is it an app? Is this going to be an automation, or should this be an agent, or should this be an app? Should this be a web interface? Those questions were, I think, a lot easier to answer before. Now it's, okay, if we build it as an agent, what value is that going to give it to us? Are we going to be able to use other things? Are we going to be able to get there faster? Sometimes yes, but sometimes maybe not. You know what? A simple Power Automate flow is going to be fine for this particular thing, or just a simple form collecting data that I can just pick a few options and hit submit. That might be fine. How that's delivered, again, through an interface, again, that's probably evolving as well. So I wish I had that end in mind. That is the thing that I think I'm missing right now. If I had that end in mind going, okay, we're going to use AI. Here's how it's going to be in 2 to 3 years, or here's how we're going to start working from now on. That's great. Now it's like, okay, like what is this going to be? Do I use Copilot Studio for this? Do I look at some of these other products outside of Microsoft? I mentioned Replit earlier. Replit blew my socks off when I started playing with it. What it generated for me generated an idea that I had in my head for 20 years that I kept thinking, okay, one of these days I'm going to sit down, I'm going to code this out and build this, whether it was in Power Apps or any other platform. I used Replit, and within 5-10 minutes, I had a working prototype. Google is doing amazing things with like the notebook LMs. Claude, for example, there's a ton of these tools, and it's kind of hard it's easy to get kind of bewildered in this wilderness. And like I said, following all these new AI fads, but there's some very solid tools, and Microsoft has their work cut out for them to be able, and not so to compete, but to make sure we keep our focus on the Microsoft stack. Because before, Microsoft always, whether they were ahead of the game or behind the game, they always, for the most part, won. A couple examples where they didn't. Windows Phone was a good example. And don't get me wrong, I love my Windows Phone. It's still in my drawer. I wish they still supported it. But there are times when they don't quite get it right. And this is where, and I'm going to say something kind of controversial, I'm not 100% sure Microsoft has it right. And I hope I'm wrong, because I've kind of bet my career on the Microsoft stack. But I'm also seeing a lot of the other things, and I'm watching a lot of videos outside of the Microsoft world and seeing a lot of amazing things that could really shake up the whole way we do business applications going forward.
Yeah, yeah. And I think just on some of what you were saying on the agents and Microsoft kind of pushing that, and you know, that anxiety around should I be using it? Maybe I shouldn't be using it, but I'm getting pressure to use it because people just everyone wants to adopt AI, right? And I feel like that was a lot of the pushback on. I'm not sure if you noticed, but I'm pretty sure you did. The way that they framed these new Copilot Studio experience, where it kind of looks like Power Automate, where you can effectively build an agent flow, and it looks like Power Automate. And I feel like a lot of people who have had many years in the industry kind of thought to themselves, "Oh, I've seen this before. Like Power Automate is going to become Copilot Studio." And I
Hmm.
think it alludes to a very important point where not everything needs to be an agent, right? And
Yes.
that takes development time and it introduces risks, obviously, because you're adding a generative sense to the work that you're doing. But I think it was a really interesting point and one I wanted to put some more attention on. But I went to the MVP Summit. I saw you there as well. I'm sure you attended a lot of the Power Platform talks that I
Yep.
attended.
Yeah.
And, without releasing any NDA, of course, but I was under the same camp as you right now, where I don't think Microsoft, I feel like for the first time in a while, they're in the lead in the sense of they kind of push Copilot into everything. Like they didn't really think it through, right? It was just kind of
Yep.
straight, it was on Bing, it was on
Yep.
Word, it was on PowerPoint, it was just helping you with everything. It wouldn't go away, right? And I feel like that came a lot because they were kind of leading that race with
Mhm.
Copilot. They made that big investment in OpenAI, and obviously Satya and Sam had that relationship. So it was interesting from a technology perspective. But you've had a lot of skin in the game for a long time, and it seems like you're in a position where, and also a lot of us, it's kind of like that Socrates. Is it Socrates that said, the only thing I know is that I don't know anything, and I think it's
Yes.
it's, it's, it's a very big case here because I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
we don't know the direction that this is all moving in, and I think a lot of people are getting that anxiety, and when they see the word AI, it just gives them something because it's like, oh, I can kind of keep up with this thing. But even from a
Mm.
personal sense and a professional sense, I think we're using a lot of technology. Like I use Notion, I use Evernote. There's something called Motion. I use Google Docs. I use Google Drive. I use iCloud. I use OneDrive. It's just so much technology that I'm trying to keep in my personal workflow, in my professional workflow too, and it's making it too much. It's actually impacting my workflow negatively. You know what I mean? Like I think I
Yes. Yeah.
think
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's too much. So this is kind of where we are with it. And there was a lot of gold in what you said. So I just kind of wanted to illustrate those points mainly. And Nick, I was researching you because I like to research my guests and know kind of where they're at and what they've done in their careers so I can ask these questions. But you're a 6 times MVP, so you've been awarded the MVP award 6 times. Um, and a lot of people, and I'm sure you get these messages too, ask me how they can become an MVP and how they can contribute to the community. And they have all these ideas, but they're afraid to show them. So I kind of want to dedicate this latter part of the episode to those people who know they should be contributing to the community, but perhaps don't know where to start and maybe get them started on that track towards MVP. So I guess the question here, Nick, is what advice would you give those people?
Well, I think for the first off, and I know this is kind of a standard answer, is you shouldn't necessarily be chasing after the MVP like a certification or a degree or something like that. It's not we talked about earlier about the end in mind. Being an MVP is more of um, it's more of a way of, I think, a way of working within the community more than anything. So it's not about attaining something. There's a lot of people I know that are very strong in the community that aren't MVPs, and they're not interested in becoming MVPs. There's other people that sort of became an MVP, but very quickly, they got the award for 1 year and then they kind of backed out. They didn't realize what it all meant. So for me, it's a case of there's a lot of different ways to contribute. Like it's okay to have that in the back of your mind going, hey, it'd be really cool to be part of the MVP program. And don't get me wrong, and you can answer this as well. The being part of the MVP program is a lot of fun. It's really cool. You get to work with new technology. You have a really great community to interact with. You get to interact with the product team directly. There's MVP Summit. Yeah, you do get a few software benefits here and there, but even that's kind of inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. Um, And yeah, so basically it's really more of, if you're willing to, if this is something you like doing in terms of the community work, and when I say community work, the stuff that gets you that MVP award. And again, I want to reiterate, it's an award, not a certification, is doing things like, doing what we're doing here, doing a podcast. I do a podcast with Alika. It's one of my favorite things to do in the world. She's one of my best friends, and it's just a lot of fun, but it is work. We do have to kind of put the episodes together, do the editing. There are some times where we're kind of in a bit of an argument on something completely different, and the episodes don't quite always, jive super well. I think we hide it pretty good, but we do get along really well for the most part. And so there's that aspect of it. There's doing the blogs. I love blogging. I'm actually more of a consumer of blogs than I am of videos. I do videos now. So every time I do a blog, I do a video with it. I kind of do it as a two-parter because first off, as weird as it may be, I'm actually watching more YouTube videos now than I did before, but I have much more fun putting the YouTube videos together than actually consuming them sometimes, as weird as that may be. But for me, it's fun. It's fun work. It's like any other hobby, right? Whether you're knitting, whether you're painting, whether you're writing. To me, part of being this community work is almost a hobby. Delivering sessions is another way to do this. So I think for anybody that wants to become an MVP, first understand that, yeah, it is an award for the community work that you do, and you should like doing it. You should like doing that community work. You don't have to, if you don't want to be a presenter, you don't have to be, but if you do, if you like to show off the new tech and talk about it in front of 50, 100 people, go for it, do it. There's lots of user groups, a lot of community events happening that they're always looking for, new speakers. Sometimes the more bigger conferences and bigger community events, it is getting more and more competitive to get those speaking slots. But in those situations, let's look at Nordic Summit, for example. They do have a mentorship program that if you want to be new to speaking, the team who organizes the Nordic Summit, they actually paired people up with other senior presenters. So for example, at Nordic Summit, I'm doing a joint session with Manju from Ireland, and she's a new up and coming speaker. So I'm kind of letting her drive most of it, but I'm kind of co-presenting with her to kind of, as a way to get her more comfortable. And I'm sure like she's already a great speaker. So probably like, the next events, she'll be off on her own, doing her own thing. But there are ways for people who are new to the community to get into that. But yeah, in terms of writing a blog, go to WordPress and just start writing a blog and it could be simple. You don't have to have these big grand topics. It could be something very simple going, hey, I figured out this power effects formula. If it was something that you had to spend a bit of time to solve for yourself, I can guarantee you there's more people out there that need to solve the exact same thing, as much as you might think it's a silly little thing. So just little things like that. Like this is something that drove me crazy. People like, I don't know what to blog about. Like, okay, what did you do for your work last week? What problems did you solve? Oh, well, I had to do this for a client, or I had to do this for a client. Well, basically redo it in a trial environment and display that, make a video on it. Because people want to learn this stuff. And then the other thing that I kind of caution events like, oh, well, such and such. Oh yeah, well, I want to do a thing on Power Pages and solution management Power Pages, but I'm not going to bother because Nick, you've already done a blog post and a video on it. So what? You have a unique take on it that's completely different from my perspective. Chances are Microsoft added 10 features in the last 2 weeks since I posted my video that they haven't talked about yet. So there's the opportunity there. So jump on that. So there's tons of different ways to create community content. And once you start doing it, and as soon as you post a blog or post a video, or even if you're doing a session at a user group, even if it's in the church basement of your local town to 3 people, advertise that on LinkedIn saying, hey, I'm going to talk about Power Apps on this day. Come check me out. Or make sure you have your friends take some pictures. I presented this and it was a really good crowd and they asked a lot of good questions. Post that up on LinkedIn. And that's going to build your credibility within the community. And then, what's going to happen if you're doing this consistently, probably over even a short period of time, and I would say 6 months to a year, maybe, people are going to notice this and they're going to start giving you, feedback saying, yeah, that was a great video. They're going to comment on it, get into these conversations. And eventually you will be approached to say, hey, have you thought about becoming an MVP? And then when you make sure you're I would say, make sure you're ready for it. Like if you post one blog article, don't expect to get the MVP award for that. Make sure you have a good little library of content being built up. But then chances are someone will approach you to become part of the community or to get the MVP award, even though you're maybe already part of the community. Again, going to user groups and conferences, ask questions, start interacting with people. And like all of us are very approachable. We want to hear what you're working on. Nothing gives me more joy when someone brings a laptop and shows me, hey, based on your blog, I did this. Check out what I built. This is really, really cool. So these are the types of things I think people can do to get that MVP award. But again, the award doesn't necessarily mean that's your gateway into the community. Yes, it does open a lot of doors, but you could be part of the community without it, or as you lead up into it as well. And it's a lot of fun, to be honest.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and agreed. And I thought I'd cover that up just because, I get a lot of questions. I'm sure you get a lot of questions about it. And I love everything you said, and I advocate for that. And just building on some of those points you made, I think when people say they don't know how to, so there's two things I've realized that people struggle with sharing their content, is that they don't know what to post and they're scared to post it.
Mm.
Or they also
Yep.
they don't know what to post because there's someone else that posted it and you covered all of them. So my practical advice to that would be have an ideas bank, like have somewhere where you store your ideas, right? Write them down while you're working. Make a note of them because sometimes, a week can go by and you can forget about what you did, and that's general, especially when you're working with a tech stack that's changing so often. So have somewhere where you store your ideas. And then in terms of the anxiety and fear of putting yourself out there, I always say start small. Like I started with blog posts, and even then was a little bit, scary for me because I always like to write, but I was never used to putting myself out there. Like before LinkedIn, I didn't have social media because I just didn't like it. And growing up with my friends in school, obviously everyone has social media, and they were all, like, where are you? Where's your Instagram? Like, how do you not have Instagram? How do you keep up with the world? And I was just like, yeah, like I was like living under a rock to them. That's basically
Yeah.
how it was. But yeah, so that kind of just alludes to the anxiety of posting. Just start small, and if you don't want to speak yet, then don't speak. Or if you want to speak at a big conference, build yourself up with a small user group. So I think there's a lot of strategies you can take, especially from what you said. So I appreciate you answering that, Nick. um Okay, so final question, and this is around your career. So you've had years of experience within the Microsoft tech space, and you made a big career move. So you were working for Microsoft, and you eventually left and went into your own practice. And please tell me if anything I'm saying is incorrect. But I wanted to get this kind of final insight from you, from people trying to pursue a fulfilling career, right? I feel like there's a lot of reasons we do what we do, and we like technology and we love to engage in it, and we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't like it, because a lot of people are in this space by choice, not because they were forced to. But what advice would you, firstly, that pivot you made from Microsoft to going into your own space, what decisions were involved in that? And what advice would you give to people who are looking, and maybe are looking to make a jump, whether it's self-employment or that new company that role's been advertised for a few weeks? What advice would you give to those people who are trying to achieve a more fulfilling career?
Wow. So that pivot out of Microsoft into independent was version 3 of me going independent. I've gone independent for that would be my third time doing it. So originally, I worked for first a kind of a customer, got into consulting, worked for a few different Microsoft partners, went off on my own, began to grow a business, and actually had employees and stuff. And that's something in terms of entrepreneurship, and we could talk about an hour on that topic alone. If you're going off on you to one thing, I would say if you're going to go off on your own, just decide: are you going to be a company of one? Or are you going to start growing and expanding your business? And again, very much like the MVP program, very much like the work we do, you have to enjoy running a business, doing the strategic work, and being okay with getting your hands away from the technology and relying on other people to do it, if that's what you want to do. I went down that path and I did not like it at all. It actually burnt me out. Running a business, having employees, dealing with all that, dealing with the projects, dealing with bad customers, all of this stuff. completely kind of wore me out. And then from there, went back to work for a Microsoft partner, kind of calmed down. And I've talked about this in other podcasts as well. So for me, the other two times that I became independent was I've made a choice to be a company of one. I'm going to do the hands-on work that I like doing. And with that job, I can do what I enjoy doing. I can make money at it, and I don't have to worry about all the other stuff. Now, if you are the type that wants to grow a business and to have the employees and kind of be in charge and begin to build out your, that kind of thing, if that's what you enjoy, definitely go do that too. You have to understand what it is that you like doing, and seeing the opportunities there. And if you do enjoy doing something, you're passionate about it, then it becomes a lot easier. But recognize you can't just always do the fun stuff. Every single job, being an independent, you have to do the other stuff. I still have to do accounting work and get my books ready for the accountant. That's the worst thing to me at the end of the year to do, which you have to do it. So there's things like that. You just understand that, yeah, with the good comes the bad, but it balances out, helps those peaks and valleys. Um, and then in terms of like the decision to leave Microsoft, the whole decision to go into Microsoft and to leave Microsoft, very interesting. The opportunity came to me, to go work in the docs area to build the documentation for Power Pages. I like doing documentation, and I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but I enjoyed doing it. Getting into Microsoft it was an opportunity. And at that time I was very happy doing what I was doing. I was independent. I had good projects I was working on. I had good clients I was working with, but it was just too good of an opportunity to turn down. And I didn't know if it was going to come back around again. So I decided to go for it. And it was a good experience. I like to tell people I know how the sausage is made now, basically within Microsoft. And it was good. And that's not to say I would go back to Microsoft if it was the right role. I don't know if the right role exists for me right now. I also don't know if Microsoft is really hiring right now because of all their layoffs and things like that. But definitely overall, despite their faults, they are a very good company to work for. And they're probably one of the very few in the world in terms of big companies that I would consider going back to at some point. Um, like I said, for the right position and the right role. However, where I was in my career and how I saw it, I like being hands-on with the docs. I definitely was, but I also found that being in the field gives you a certain experience and gives you that edge of learning. I like learning, and I think all of us do. And that's another thing in the career. You need to like learning. If you love learning, this is an amazing career to be in because you're constantly learning new things. Like even this morning, I learned new things as I was working on some code kind of thing. So I think that's just something if you're, just sort of be aware of. And then, so part of the reason why I left Microsoft was, yeah, I was seeing the new things, but I wasn't learning or I wasn't being challenged the way that I like to be challenged. So there was opportunities for me to leave Microsoft and go back into the independent world. So I decided, yep, I'll do that. It was 2 years. It was definitely a good 2 years. It was very interesting. But it was time for me to move on. So that's what kind of made that decision. And the fact I had been independent before made that a lot easier. I kind of knew it's okay to be independent. It's, the work is out there. As long as you can manage things appropriately, you can deal with those peaks and valleys, and build out your network as well, around that. So yeah, it's definitely but also understand the very cool thing about Power Platform and this whole technology stack is you don't have to go to school for 8 years or 4 years to get into it. If you're a high school kid if you have access to a laptop and the internet, you can become a Power Platform professional. This is what's so cool about this. The way to get in here is actually the tools to access those tools are pretty easy. Yeah, you need to have skill, you need to have talent, and you need to be dedicated. But if you have those things, you can get into this without being other barriers like having to have a 4-year university degree or a doctorate or something like that. You can actually get into um, this field. I wouldn't say easily, you still have to do the work, but in terms of those roadblocks that might exist for other careers, they don't exist. So that is definitely one of the cool things about this. And it's fun. It's rewarding. It's fueling a creative side of my brain that I can go and I can be creative, even building something like a business application. There's a weird thing about it. When we talk to our friends, we go to the community events and we're hanging out with people. It's weird that business software is what brought us all together. As weird as that sounds. So yeah, definitely it's definitely a good career to be in. And yeah, in terms of advice, I mean, everybody's journey will be different, but I would just sort of say, yeah, just start making. And if you love making stuff on the Power Platform or any technology, this is a good career and it's a good way to make money.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'd also add to that and say learn in public. I love the idea of people learning and starting in their journeys and sharing that because whilst you're doing that, we can't lie. I think the community interaction and the community engagement does give you better opportunities. It gets your name out there. People know who you are. You can speak to people who have influence in the space, who have conversations with the product team. I think learning in public as well is super important. I love what you said because personally, I did the traditional route, going to university and doing it wasn't a software degree, but it was a technology degree. And obviously it had coding bases and I wasn't so sure this was what I wanted to pursue. And the Power Platform really gives those people an opportunity who try to get into coding. You would need to understand programming. I think it's really helpful, but you don't need it. Right. And I think that's super exciting for people who have tried their hand at getting into technology with traditional code and now they have another option. So I think it's definitely the place to be, especially with agents and where we're going and what we discussed, and a lot of exciting things coming. Um, Nick, we've come, I think we're just over an hour. Thank you so much for coming on. I love giving this kind of ending segment to my guest. The red carpet is yours. Let the people know what you're up to, where they can find you. And yeah, the floor is yours, Nick.
Yeah, perfect. So first off, I would, got to do a plug for the Power Platform Boost podcast. We release every 2 weeks. So we released this past week on Wednesday. So the next episode won't be this coming Wednesday, but the following one. So that's our current schedule. We are debating maybe bumping that up again in the fall to a weekly, but don't tell Ulrika that I said that out in public. That's a conversation we've been having. But basically, we talk a lot about basically the core of it is we talk about the new and exciting stuff in the Power Platform, what we found out in the past 2 weeks. We are diving in a lot of more of these conversations around AI and what does that all mean. But we also feel that our audience, very much like yours, are asking the same questions. So we also want to make sure that the people don't feel like they're the only ones asking these questions. So check out the Power Platform Boost podcast. So, listen, like, subscribe, and of course to yours as well. The other things in terms of events coming up will be in for the Dynamics user group in August in Colorado. Call it the Rocky Mountain meetup or something like that. Doing a session there on Power Pages, collab days in Finland. I think I'm allowed to say this now, but I'll be in the UK September 16th for Experts Live, doing a session on vibe coding actually, which is pretty
Nice.
exciting for me.
Love it.
Going into Nordic Summit, where I mentioned earlier that I'd be doing a co-session with Manju. And then at the end of October, doing a workshop as well as a session at the Power Platform Community Summit in Las Vegas. The workshop it is kind of titled the PL 900. For those of you who don't know, it's the Power Platform Fundamentals. So it's not specifically, it is covering the stuff that would be covered in the PL 900, but for me, it's more of a way to do a workshop at the start of that conference for folks that know nothing about the Power Platform, give them a solid foundation that they're going to get a lot more value over the next 3 days as they keep hearing all of these new announcements and seeing these new things. Because I know people get sent to these conferences to learn stuff. Like, hey, we're going to do a Power Platform project. Go to this conference and figure out as much as you can. So hopefully this workshop, the PL 900 workshop that I'll be doing, will give people a lot of that foundation, whether or not they want to write the certification. And again, Boost 100 for $100 US dollar discount. So use the discount code. And then, yeah, I think that, and then doing a session with Eliza Benitez. So I don't know if you folks, if obviously everybody knows who Eliza is. She's a cloud advocate at Microsoft. So we're doing a co-session on building apps using Copilot around the Plan Designer and all the other tools to use to build apps. So definitely excited about that. And of course, if you have other questions or ways, just reach out to me in LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to find me.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Nick. And yeah, it seems like you're traveling a lot. So best of luck with all of your workshops and conferences. It sounds exciting. A lot of places to touch. And I'm sure they're all going to be packed with value. Hopefully I get to catch you in the UK, September 19th. I will remember
Or
that.
16th, I think. Yeah.
16th. Okay. September 16th. So hopefully I can catch you.
Well,
But
that'd be
yeah,
cool.
thank you
Yeah.
so much. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I got a ton of value out of this, so I know our listeners did as well. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, Nick.
Thank you. I appreciate being on.
No worries. Take it easy. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.